One reason the Raiders will make the playoffs in 2024, one reason they won't. That plus a whole lot more comes up on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for June 7th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. To get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available, as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you. Cannot believe how much support we get on the YouTube page. It's big time. It really is. And Raider Nation, we thank you so much for that. I cannot thank you enough. I also can't thank my man Ari enough either. I shout him out every single day because he puts in the work. He always makes sure we're on YouTube. We're looking good. Takes a lot of pride in his work. Even hits me up and is like, hey, man, we need to do this. Or, hey, man, you did this and this could be better. He has no problem letting me know how everything could be a little bit better or a lot better, I should say. And he takes a lot of pride. So we shout him out. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, which we encourage you to do on the daily, 707-654-4693. It's a Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. A lot of great calls and texts. We'll try to get as many as possible as we close out the week really strong on this Friday. We'll do that in segment number 3. Segment number 2, one reason the Raiders will make the playoffs, one reason that they won't. We'll talk about that. I'll give you my answers. And on top of that, I'll even tell you where it came from. And it's actually a pretty cool story. So we'll do that all coming up in segment number 2. Here's segment number 1, just news and notes, just a couple little things that I collected, nuggets I like to call them, little nuggets here in segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. We'll go ahead and jump right into it. Off top, Warren Sharp from Sharp Football, he's very analytical. He puts out a lot of analytics on Twitter. He'll put out a lot of facts about individual teams or the whole league in general. And he really caught my attention on Thursday with this tweet he put out. Again, it's Warren Sharp from Sharp Football. He said, % of second half drives that went 3 and out. So basically, you get the ball in the third and the fourth quarter. How many times did that offense stall out in a 3 and out type setting? The Denver Broncos were the very worst. 43% of the time in the second half of games in 2023, they went 3 and out. Obviously, you're not going to win a whole lot of games like that. 43% of the time. And look, that is not just times that they stalled out without scoring. That's times that they went 3 and out, which means they put that defense back on the field quick, fast, and hurry and did not allow them to get much of a break. So they were the very worst. 43% of the time, that's what happened. 41% of the time, Seattle and New England did that. 40% of the time, the Atlanta Falcons did that. 39% of the time, the Colts did that. 38% of the time was the Raiders. So that got me thinking. That got the balls in my head start ringing, right? I was thinking, wait, hold on. 38% of the time. And again, like I mentioned with the Denver Broncos, that doesn't mean 38% of the time they didn't score. That means 38% of the time the defense got off the field and they had to go right back on the field. So we look at this Raiders defense and we think that it's going to be really good in 2024. Matter of fact, I believe it's going to be a lot better than it even was in 2023 just because of the addition of Christian Wilkins, obviously another year in Patrick Graham's scheme. And I just think that they're going to have an opportunity to be special. But the problem is, if they don't get some consistent play offensively, then they're going to have situations like that where they get off the field and get right back on. And all I could think of when I'm reading this and looking at it, I'm thinking, man, that game coming out of the bye week, Minnesota Vikings, Allegiant Stadium, the Raiders lose 3-0. What happened? The defense was on the field the whole game. And even being in the locker room following the game, I was talking to guys like Amik Robertson and Max Crosby and Nate Hobbs, and none of them were mad publicly at the offense. They all said we should have scored. It's on us. We should have scored. We were able to hold Minnesota. We kept them out of the end zone, but we should have taken the ball away and scored. So they actually took the right approach. And then, of course, we all remember 4 days later, they went and put 63 points up on the Chargers. So they took all their frustration out on them. But that's something that can't happen in 2024, right? We're talking about expectations of the team. We're going to talk about in segment number 2, why the Raiders will make the playoffs and why they won't. They won't make the playoffs if they're 3 and out in the second half of games 38% of the time. I mean, think about that. That's closing time, right? That's when games are tight and you've got to make a play here and there to seal the deal. And they weren't able to do it. That's why they're going to lose games. If they have an offense like that in 2024, it's not going to go over very well. We've been talking for the last few weeks, how the Raiders can go from being the 11th seed to being a top 7 seed. Well, you got to improve off that. You can't have 38% of the time you have 3 and out in the second half. And look, the team that was a 10 seed, Indianapolis Colts, They were at 39%. So they were right there, right above the Raiders, right? And so obviously they struggled with that. Another team that missed the playoffs, the Jaguars, at 37% of the time. Like, you get a theme that I'm rocking with here. And even the Cincinnati Bengals, they missed the playoffs too, right? Remember, the Cincinnati Bengals were the 8 seed, the Jaguars were the 9 seed, the Colts were the 10, and the Raiders were 11th. Cincinnati did it 36% of the time. Oh, so did Minnesota. Remember that 3-0 game? 36% of the time, 3 and out. A lot of that had to do with their quarterback play. So when I say that the Raiders need to get good, consistent quarterback play, it's so that doesn't happen. You've got to at least, I'm not saying you're going to score every time. We know that that's unreasonable. But they at least got to be good enough to allow the defense to get a break, right? You can't have those 3 and outs like that. You just can't have it. That's not much worse than Denver, and Denver was bad. Denver was at 43%. The Raiders were at 38%. They've got to clean that up. They've got to get, and this was kind of consistently what the majority of the league was around 33%. That's where the Saints, the Steelers, the Giants, the Jets, the Bears, the Buccaneers, the Ravens, the Texans, and the Panthers, they were all at 33%. That's obviously the majority of the league, right? So they've got to be closer to 30%, 29%. They got to be around that range to be able to complement that defense that they have. Got to be able to give that defense a break. So I thought that was a very interesting little nugget right there from Warren Sharp, from Sharp Football. Puts out a lot of, like I said, analytical type of things on Twitter. I'm not an analytics guy, but I respect analytics, and I know what it means and brings to the table. Final thing I have for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, little news and notes, or nuggets I like to say. Josh Jacobs, there's been a lot of conversations about JJ and the fact that he did not return to the silver and black. Matter of fact, he agreed to a deal with the Green Bay Packers pretty quickly when free agency opened up. It wasn't even free agency. It was the legal tampering period. He agreed to that deal really fast, and I was pretty shocked. I thought the Raiders were going to give an attempt to try to bring him back, but he was a guest on Chris Long's podcast, the Green Light podcast, and they talked about a variety of different subjects, including what happened at the end, why he ended up leaving the Raiders, even though AP called him the heart of the team. Here's Josh Jacobs in his words on what happened.
Talking to guys, everybody loves Antonio. He's a dog. He's one of us. He played, man. Like, right. When you're around the guy, so when he came in, it probably had to be tough being like, hey, I know I'm leaving, but this does look fun. It looks like he's going to turn it around. And are you able to like pull for those guys even though you're somewhere else?
Yeah. So like with him, man, like, and you got to know, he called me the heart of the team. So, like, he was one of them dudes that he believed in me. Like, I honestly say that from even before he took over the job, he used to talk to me and give me, pointers and stuff. And, like, I wanted to, come back and play for him and things like that. But also at the same time, when it came down to it, like, it was out of his hands.
Yeah.
Like, he like, we want you back, but it's like, he can't really do much about it to have me back because he's a first-time head coach. Mm-hmm. And, Mr. Davis didn't want to put too much on his plate. Yeah. So he put people around him to handle all of them things. So it was just like that. But then not only that, man, I never talked to the GM or none of that. So it was like, it just was what it was. At the end of the day, like I told him, I'm like, man, look, I got every Raider record since I've been here, basically. Yeah. And I'm like, if y'all don't have enough respect in me to sit me down and have a conversation, then we ain't got nothing to talk about. And it was just that simple, really.
So interesting thoughts right there from JJ, again, part of the Chris Long podcast, Greenlight podcast. Very good podcast. I definitely encourage you to go check it out. Chris Long is a dude who's made a really good lane for himself in the podcast world. And obviously he's got a ton of friends across the National Football League. So to see Josh Jacobs on, I thought it was pretty cool, but thought that was a nice little, snippet to bring to the table of, in his words, what happened. And he said he never even talked to the GM. And that kind of lines up with what Tom Telesco said to me at the Combine when we talked about Josh Jacobs and the priority to bring him back. And he said, look, in the National Football League, there's no more lead backs. It's all running back by committee. And we all kind of looked at each other and said, okay, it doesn't sound like he's going to be aggressive going after bringing Josh Jacobs back. But to know that he never even talked to him, it's kind of a slap on the face to a dude who gave a lot to the Raiders. And I know a lot of people will say, yeah, Q, you're just, you're friends with him. You like him. I do. But I do think he did a lot for the silver and black, and I think it would have been at least a courtesy to pick up the phone and say, hey, man, look, I know that I didn't draft you, so we have no relation, but I just, we're not going to be able to bring it back. I know you deserve some money. You want money, and this is kind of my philosophy. I just think that would have been a nice tip of the cap, but I understand business, and it don't always work that way. in business. That's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Little news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, one reason the Raiders will make the playoffs in 2024 and one reason they won't. Plus, I'll tell you the backstory of how that came to be. That's all coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about one reason the Raiders will make the playoffs in 2024 and also one reason why they won't. So I'm sure you're thinking, okay, Q, where did this even come from? Like, how did that pop into your mind? Which, I don't blame you. Things pop into my mind, subjects pop into mind, topics pop into my mind all the time. I live too much in the world of coming up with topics, coming up with things to talk about, but that's what I do. But this one actually didn't come from me. Lately, I've been doing this kind of collaboration with Fox 5 Sports locally here in Las Vegas. They're the news station, and they've collaborated with us, and we've been doing a fun little TV show called Sin City Beat. We've been doing it pretty much consistently each and every week. I haven't been on it every single week, but more times than not, I'm on it talking Raiders, talking Aces, whatever the case may be. When they talk Golden Knights, they usually don't bring me on. They'll bring someone else on from our hockey station that we have at Lotus Broadcasting. So on the show, we recorded it on Thursday, and one of the questions that was asked was, all right, Q, give me one reason why the Raiders will make the playoffs and one reason they won't. And I thought, wow, right? That's actually a really good question. As much time as I spent talking about how do they go from being the 11th seed to a top 7 seed, I didn't really narrow it down to one reason because I think there's many different angles that you could take when you're talking about the Raiders. But when put on the spot, which is what I thought made it great, and it was, it wasn't something that I was prepared for. It wasn't something that was, told to me ahead of time, like, hey, this is going to be one of the topics. It was just like, all right, boom, we're recording the show. We're on TV. Boom, Q, one reason why the Raiders will make the playoffs. So I had to think. I had to dance a little bit. Not going to lie. I did a little bit of dancing. Obviously, I immediately thought about the defense. I started thinking about the corners. I started thinking about the linebackers, right? The continuity with Patrick Graham in the third year there as a defensive coordinator. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just like, bink, it popped in my head, and I said, oh, wait, Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins is the one reason why the Raiders will make the playoffs in 2024. And then I expanded on it because Christian Wilkins, that dude in the middle of that Raiders defensive line, makes everybody else better. All 10 dudes on the team around him are better because of him, right? And then I had a little bit of pushback. Well, what if he's a bust? Well, what if he's not really that good of a player? I don't think that that's the case. Just by seeing his work ethic, seeing him out there at practice, seeing the way he's getting after it, the way him and Max are already really getting along, and you can see that they're trying to be the leaders of that defense, I just think he makes everyone on that defense that much better. He makes Max better, and you don't have to make Max Crosby better. He's already great, right? Malcolm Kuntz, who came on strong at the end of the season last year, makes him better, right? Tyree Wilson, when he gets on the field, he's going to be better because Christian Wilkins is in the middle and providing that push that it's been a long time since the Raiders have been able to consistently get that from the defensive tackle position. So he makes them better. And if the defensive line is better around him, the corners are better. We've talked about Jack Jones quite a bit. Mina Kimes called him the X Factor. You know how he could be even better? If he doesn't have to cover as long because, well, the pass rush is getting home. That's all going to go back to Christian Wilkins, right? The other corner, obviously, it's going to be a question who's going to earn that job. Jacorian Bennett, maybe Brandon Faison. I think it's one of the two. Okay, they're still better because of that dude in the middle of the defensive line. The linebackers, you're keeping them clean. The safeties on the back end, they can focus in on making plays, right? So I just said, okay, you know what? I think it's the defense, but if I want to focus in and just narrow it down to one guy, obviously we know it's a collaborative effort. There's a lot of reasons to like the defense, but the main reason that the defense will be better than it was last year is because of that bloodthirsty pirate in the middle of that defensive line named Christian Wilkins. So that was my one reason why they will make the playoffs in 2024. My one reason that they wouldn't, and of course the easy answer is, well, quarterback play stunk, right? But I wanted to take it a step further. I didn't want to kind of take that low hanging fruit. And I thought, Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator. I think there's a lot of questions around him. I think that he's got a lot of pressure on him to be able to get the most out of the Raiders offense that has weapons. We know about the usual suspects, Devontae, Jacoby. Brock Bowers is a guy who was drafted to make that offense that much better. Michael Mayer was there from a year ago. Trey Tucker, that was my X factor, a guy that could stretch the field, use his speed to his advantage, right? I mean, you could talk about the offensive line. You could talk about the running game. I think Zamir White's going to be able to, pick up where he left off as long as that offensive line is where it needs to be, right? I mean, you can individually pull out any of those guys and say, okay, Devontae Adams, the offense is going to go as Devontae goes. The offense is going to go as Aiden goes or Gardner Minshew, whoever wins the quarterback battle. But in the moment that I was there, sitting at Fox 5, thinking about it, I said, you know what, Luke Getsy, he's going to be the reason why the Raiders don't make the playoffs. Now, I'm not rooting for that. I'm not saying he's going to fail, but he's got a lot to prove. In Chicago, he wasn't a very good offensive coordinator. The question is, and what the Raiders are banking on, that wasn't Getsy, that was Chicago. That was their offensive weapons. That was their organization. That was just a mess there. And Luke Getsy is actually a sharp offensive mind who's going to figure out how to get it done with what he's got in Vegas. That's what they're banking on. But there's a chance that maybe Luke Getsy is just not that good of an offensive coordinator. Let's not, close your eyes to it. He wasn't the Raiders' first choice. He might have been the best choice at the end of the day. I had people that hit me up and was like, man, the Raiders dodged a bullet by not going and getting Cliff Kingsbury. Because remember, that was the first guy. Cliff Kingsbury was supposed to be the guy. I remember sitting at the barbershop in the cut in Henderson, sitting in the barbershop, and all of a sudden, Cliff Kingsbury has turned down the Raiders. He's not going to be their offensive coordinator. I was like, whoa, it's a Saturday morning before I got my weekly haircut. But I had a lot of people hit me up and say, hey, man, Raiders dodged the bullet. You didn't want him anyway. Luke Getsy's much better. But what we saw in Chicago wasn't much better. Now, was that the quarterback fault? Was that the team fault? Was that just an organizational mess? It's very possible, but we don't know. He was in Green Bay. He wasn't the OC. Like a lot of people say, well, look what he did in Green Bay. He didn't really do that in Green Bay, and he had a Hall of Fame quarterback that he was working with in Aaron Rodgers, right? So, I mean, again, there's a lot of questions around the offensive coordinator. And then the more I do research on him and people start telling me about the horizontal game, the side to side, and that there was too much of that in Chicago when he was the offensive play caller, then I really started to get concerned because that's what I've seen a lot of at practice as well. And again, it's only OTAs. It's not, it's not training camp. It's not the preseason. It's not games that matter. It's not any of that. There's no pads on, but I've seen a lot of sideline to sideline. I mean, I came back and talked about one of the practices where I said, that they went a lot of sideline to sideline, got the ball out of their hands really quickly and got it to playmakers, and the defense was stretching it out, right? Running them off right off the field. And again, they're not showing a whole lot. It's OTAs. It's nothing to panic about, but in my mind, I still remember the different people I've talked to. It's like, yeah, it was a lot of horizontal. You got to get, up and down the field. So, Brock Bowers is obviously a guy that they brought in for that. And it's funny, going back to what Warren Sharp said about, 3 and outs, maybe the Raiders have to switch up their style. Instead of running the rock on first down consistently, maybe they're going to have to throw the ball to Brock Bowers on first down, right? And maybe pick up, 5-6 yards and use that as a glorified run. But that's going to go back to Luke Getsy, where he's got to be creative to do that, so it keeps opposing defenses off balance. So for me, if I had to narrow it down, and that's the difficult part, was narrowing it down to one reason why they would and one reason why they wouldn't. But that was the reasons for me. What says you? Right? You'll have all weekend to think about it, right? 707-654-4693. Let me know about it. Give me one reason, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, none of that LeBron James type stuff. One reason the Raiders will make the playoffs in 2024, and one reason the Raiders will not make the playoffs in 2024. Let me know about it. Again, 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts are coming up next as we close out the show. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Start things off with a call from Raider Cisco. He's calling to talk about Gardner Minshew and has an idea or two of how the Raiders could use him. Here he is, Raider Cisco.
What's up, Q? Raider Nation, it's Raider Cisco. Just waiting for this offseason, man. I'm ready for some real-life action. We're ready for the season to start. You're there in person. I want to just ask you a quick little question. I do think O'Connell will win the starting job. I just think naturally he's just a better thrower, and that's what's going to win us games is who can hit those passes. But what I was wondering is if you've seen at training camps or any of the workouts, any designed run plays with Gardner Minshew. Because I would like to see kind of like the Mariota package. Not to that extent. Mariota was a better runner, but I would like to see that added in our game plan. Couple runs in there with Minshew on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, keep the defense guessing, and then we could throw in like a fake run, and Minshew ends up throwing the ball. Yeah, man. I was just wondering if you've noticed anything like that. I do think O'Connell will get the job, but it would be nice to sprinkle in some Minshew magic in that playbook. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. Just win, baby.
Cisco, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And you're right about the mobility. He does have more mobility than Aiden, but he's not like he's some fleet-footed guy, right? I mean, I think back to, when even the 49ers used to do that with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick. Like, Cap was way more of an athlete than Gardner Minshew. And we've seen, obviously, other scenarios with that as well, where you see it's just an extreme athlete come in, even with the Raiders, as you mentioned, right? When Carr would go out and Mariota would come in, little Mariota package. Like, that was cool, except for he was never healthy. But I think with Aiden O'Connell, if he wins the starting quarterback job, I just don't know if that's healthy for him being such a young guy in the league. I don't know if you want to take him out of the game or get him from under center, right? I don't know if you want to do that. Now, maybe if you go Wildcat for a play or two, I just don't think you want to bring in another quarterback. I think if another quarterback comes in, right, whether it's Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, it's because one wasn't effective, right? So I just think that Gardner is really good backup material. I think he's really good insurance. I think Aiden O'Connell's going to win the job. He's definitely showing a better understanding of the offense so far. But again, it's early June. So, jobs are not won in early June. They'll be won in late July, early August, and obviously heading through the preseason as well. So I don't think that that's something that the Raiders are going to think about doing. I don't really think that AP is much of a gimmick type guy. And I say gimmick, like, with all due respect, I just don't think he's much of that type of guy. I think he's more just, hey, let's play some smash mouth ball. Let's get it done. Let's ram it down their throat, right? There's no reason to get all cute and tricky. I don't see AP as that guy. But again, it's June, so we'll see what they do. But thanks so much for that call, my man. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from King Raider in Compton, Cali. So what's up, Q? It's your boy King Raider here in Compton, Cali with a quick one. My wife got me and my son's tickets to our first ever Raiders game using Gametime. LOL. I just wanted to add to your ad about Gametime that they accept Affirm, which makes it even more easier to purchase tickets because you can use a payment plan. So yeah, use Gametime, nation. Also, can you shout out my sons, Fat Boy and Angel? They graduated, one to high school, the other to middle school. Thanks for everything, Q. Raider Nation for life. That's King Raider in Compton. And hey, congratulations, man. Shout out to Fat Boy and Angel, man. That's awesome. Graduation is a good thing. And congratulations on getting hooked up with some tickets to the game, right? So you get to go see your favorite team play, the first ever Raiders game, and you use Gametime. There you go. That's the way to keep it all together and tie it all together. So I'm sure that the fine folks at Gametime will be happy to hear that. So King Raider, thanks again for that. Do appreciate you. And again, one more time, congratulations to Fat Boy and Angel on graduation. I just love the names right there. Fat Boy and Angel. That's awesome. Like, I could just hear you calling them in for dinner. Hey, Fat Boy. Hey, Angel. Come on in here and eat your dinner, man. That's all I can hear, man. I love it. Thanks so much for that text. Fantastic stuff. Up next, got a call from Raider Cal in Canada. He's calling to talk about JPJ. That's Jackson Powers Johnson, as he was a subject on the show a few days ago for not participating in Raiders OTA. Also talks about the extra salary cap space that the Raiders have. Here he is, Raider Cal in Canada.
Hey, Q. Yeah, Raider Cal from Canada. I was just, I'm in the middle of listening to your podcast from yesterday. One thing that I love is when I have something big to do and I fall behind some of the podcasts, I have multiple to listen to. So I got about an hour or so of stuff to listen to. But right now you're just talking about Jackson Powers Johnson. I don't know. Just from what I've seen since I've been watching football is when people miss practice, they tend to be a little underwhelming towards the beginning of the season. So Jackson Powers Johnson, I think he's going to be good, but I think there's going to be a lot of fuss about kind of how he performs in the beginning of the season. But I think he's going to be good. Who knows? But other than that, I don't know if you agree with that. But anyways, other than that, the only other thing, you might not be able to do this on the show, but with the cap space left, who would you take? Because me, I don't know. I might get a little bit of heat for this, but I'm really upset we got rid of Amik Robertson. But I don't know. I just think we should focus on corner. I don't know, but I don't even know who we'd take at corner besides who we've got right now. Because I'll go out and say it. I was a little disappointed with Bennett. I think that teams were targeting him, and I haven't seen him. I'm going to be honest with you, Q. I've focused on him, and I've watched him specifically. I understand he's a rookie, and we might see a big improvement from him this year, which I really hope so. But might need some help because I don't know if he's starting caliber. But I don't know. Take it easy on me, Q. Anyways, thanks. Bye.
Cal, thanks so much for the call. And normally I would agree when it comes to, guys missing practice and that they may start out slow. But in June, when it's OTAs and they're voluntary, I'm not too worried about it. Now, again, for rookies, I would like to see everyone out there and putting in the work. We saw him in rookie minicamp. We saw him leave OTAs early the very first time we were out there. And since we were out there, and when we're allowed to be out there, we haven't seen him participating. Like I saw him on Tuesday, and he was out there with Colton Miller, but he wasn't doing anything. Next week will be interesting for mandatory minicamp. I don't know if we're going to be out there one day or all 3 days, but, we'll get a better idea then. And if he's not participating in mandatory minicamp, then I'll have a little bit of concern. I'll have a lot of bit of concern when we get to Costa Mesa, and if he's not participating then all of a sudden, then what you're saying is spot on. Then all of a sudden you're starting to get Tyree Wilson type feels like, okay, this guy may not be ready for the start of the season. If he does, he may start out a little slow. I can totally feel that. But again, early June, I'm not too worried about it just yet. As far as the salary cap and maybe a veteran cornerback brought in, from what I understand, from me just listening to people talking around the facility, people that know, people that are in the mix, right? People that have a good idea of what's going on, right? People from inside the building. It doesn't sound like the Raiders want to go out and make a move for any veteran right now. I feel like if they go and make a veteran for somebody, it'll be because somebody got injured and they need somebody. I think they feel pretty good with their cornerback room right now. I didn't get the sense. Again, I was just listening. I didn't ask any questions. I just listened to people Q&A, other people that matter, right? I listen to people that are my colleagues, talk to people that matter inside the building about that exact subject. I didn't get the sense that the Raiders were in any hurry to go out and sign a veteran cornerback. But thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. I just got time for a couple more. This one's a text from Peter in Winnipeg. Says, hey, Q. It's Peter from Winnipeg here. Let's say things go well this year and the Raiders finish 10-7 with a top 5 defense. I'm sure Patrick Graham will get a shot to be a head coach somewhere. Do you see any of the positional coaches on defense being elevated to the DC spot, or do you think they would hire outside the organization? After listening to Ricky Manning speak earlier this week, he kind of sort of gives me those AP vibes. Hope all is well with everyone in Raider Nation. Go Raiders. That's Peter in Winnipeg. Thanks for the text. And, that's a good question. I think a guy like maybe Rob Leonard, the defensive line coach, may be in line. I think Ricky Manning is still a little early in the process. I'll say this, Gerald Alexander. How about that guy, the safeties coordinator for the Raiders? He came over from the Steelers, and I remember talking to Chris Carter, as a matter of fact, from Locked On Steelers. I remember asking him about Gerald Alexander. He said, Q, he's highly respected in this building. They're actually disappointed that he left to go and be the Raiders safety coordinator. Like, they really liked him a lot. So maybe, and he sounds the part too, but I give you credit, man. Ricky Manning, he brought that energy and that juice. I think he's still a little early in the process. I'm going to go ahead. If there's anybody in the building that I could see them, moving up and making the defensive coordinator, I could see Rob Leonard, the defensive line coach. I could see, like I said, Gerald Alexander, the safeties coach. Mike Caldwell. Possibly Mike Caldwell. He's a linebackers coach. He's been coaching for a while. I can see him. Rob Ryan is always a guy. He's basically an analyst, a senior analyst right there on the defense. That's a guy that's possible. I just don't know if he wants to be defensive coordinator. So I'll just go ahead and rock with actually the two of the guys that we talked to the other day. Gerald Alexander, the safeties coach. Also Rob Leonard, the defensive line coach, and Mike Caldwell, the linebackers coach. Those are the 3 guys that I'll really target and say maybe they would pique the interest of the Raiders as defensive coordinators if Patrick Graham does end up leaving. And I do believe if the Raiders have a top 5 defense, like you mentioned, he'll be gone to be a head coach somewhere. And I don't blame him, and I would actually salute him and say, hey, job well done. Right? He went from a guy who I thought was going to end up being the scapegoat and get fired and give Josh McDaniels another year to all of a sudden having this stellar unit on defense. And if he ends up turning that into a head coaching job well done. Thanks so much for that. Appreciate you. Finally, we get a call from Raider Eddie in Denver. He's calling to talk about Jack Jones, the guy who Mina Kimes and Greg Rosenthal said could be the X factor for the Raiders in 2024, but he has some concerns about his behavior, and he has a message for me. Here he is, Raider Eddie in Denver.
Hey, Q, what's up? This is Raider Eddie in Denver. Hey, I'm listening to the podcast. Thursday morning, Jack Jones is the X factor. That's possible, but the dude still has some maturity issues. I know that I called in earlier in the week, and I said, hey, this guy's been drunk on, blatantly drunk, and just acting really crazy on some social media posts that he's put up over the summer. And you responded, hey, I'm not monitoring guys' social media. I just think that's a little bit, how do I describe that? Not only is it downplaying the immaturity issues, but it's just disingenuous. What guys post on social media does matter. It's 2024. I am still concerned about Jack Jones and the maturity issues. Those just didn't get solved automatically, right? He wasn't just cut by the Patriots for nothing, and the Raiders just picked up their best DB going forward, and that's it. There's huge risk with this guy's character. And there are other podcasters, Raiders podcasters, who aren't affiliated with the Raiders organization who are posting about his behavior online. So you can pretend like it's not happening. You can say, I'm not a social media monitor. But go ahead and do that for every single thing online, every single thing social media going forward. Just say you're not a social media monitor. Yeah, I just find that disingenuous. And I think you're kind of sticking your head in the sand and saying, this is our guy, he's our superstar DB, and that's all there is to it. I'm just telling you that's not the truth. There's more risk involved. And I appreciate being able to have the fun, friendly disagreements, Q. And I am absolutely rooting for this guy to be our stud, continue to be our stud. We'll see how it goes. Go Raiders.
Raider Eddie, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you as always. And look, I remember your call like a week ago or a couple weeks ago where you're talking about Jack Jones and social media and, his maturity. And that's what I said. I said, I'm not the social media police when it comes to what was going on with Jack. Jack was on vacation. He went to Instagram Live, Twitter Live, whatever the case may be. And he was responding, namely to Patriot fans that were talking trash to him. And he was drinking. That's what I saw. I'm not going to hold that against him. I see a lot on social media that I look at and say, oh, man, I wouldn't do that. But that's me, 47 years old, that wouldn't do that, right? There's a lot of things that I don't do. Like I don't cuss on this podcast. When people say, Q, it's a podcast, you can cuss on it. I don't. It's just not me. There's a lot of things that I don't do that people can do. And there's a lot of things that aren't really that big a deal. I don't know if there's something that you're seeing that he's done on social media that you think is egregious, but I haven't seen anything. And when I say egregious, I'm talking threatening people's lives with guns, flashing guns like Damon Arnett did, or talking about, someone's sexuality or whatever their case may be, their sexual preferences, or racial slurs and stuff like that. Now to me, that's a problem, right? You can't do that. You shouldn't do that. At least you shouldn't. There's no can't. You shouldn't do that. But it's to tell me that, I'm burying my head in the sand and I'm being disingenuous. You can't tell me that. One, you don't know me. You don't know who I am. You don't know what I stand for. All you know is I do a podcast each and every day. I don't know you, so I can't tell you what you do, and I can't tell you what you're doing is disingenuous or not. Like I could say, well, Raider Eddie, every time you call, you're negative, and I can lump you into into a circle and talk bad about you, but I wouldn't do that because I don't know you. I just respect your opinion, right? But please don't tell me what I'm doing and what I'm not doing, or who I am and who I'm not, and you think that I'm affiliated with the Raiders. Again, I say it all the time. I don't collect a check from the Raiders. I wish I did. When I do, I'll tell you, right? So they're not in charge of my opinion on anything. So again, if you've seen something on social media that you thought Jack Jones did that was egregious, so be it. I missed it, okay? But there's things that you can look at and judge me if you want. Please believe. You want to know what's egregious on social media? Some of the BS that I get in my direct messages in the morning, and it's racially motivated things, people threatening me, people telling me this, that, and the third, talking about all kind of stuff. Like I can show you if I wanted to go down this rabbit hole, I can show you some of the most disrespectful stuff I get. That's pretty egregious, and I'm nobody. I'm just a dude who does a podcast and a radio show. Right. So I can only imagine what a dude like him who's in the spotlight, what kind of stuff he gets. Now, I don't respond. You can go through my Twitter account. You know, when I respond to people that say stuff that is disrespectful to me, I say, all right, thank you. Hope you have a good day. Stay blessed. That's just my way of getting through it. I've gone down the rabbit hole where I go back and forth and try to reason with people, and it doesn't work. I'm not in the business of judging people as long as they're not harming anybody. And when I see Jack Jones in person and I see him in the streets and I see him interacting with people in Las Vegas, he seems like he always has a smile on his face, seems like a really good dude. Doesn't seem edgy. Yes, he's edgy on the field. Okay. I used to say it all the time on the podcast, car thieves and choir boys. I'm okay with him being a car thief, right? That's fine. For me, I haven't seen him be that guy that you're talking about. If you have seen it, again, I'm fine with that. But like I said, I like to live in the world where I don't judge people like that. I got a tattoo on my neck that's John 8:7. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, he who is without sin cast the first stone. I'm not going to do it. Again, if you think it's me burying my head in the sand, if it's me being disingenuous, that's fine. That's okay with that. That's not me. Okay, so be it. I mean, there's so many things that we could judge each other about all the time. You know, you can come to the podcast and say, well, you know, Q had a couple kids and 2 different baby mamas, and he didn't marry any of them, and he ended up with someone else. You can judge me for that and say that's wrong. Okay, maybe it is, but that's what I chose to do. I don't know about your lifestyle. I don't know about Jack Jones' lifestyle. I don't, right? I mean, it's just, again, I'm not in charge of being the judge and the executioner. If someone's doing something really foul and harming people, that's one thing. But if a dude's, you know, responding to someone live in real time and they're talking about this, that, and the third, okay, so be it. I didn't see it on vacation. Outside of I wouldn't have done that, but then again, I just wouldn't have done it. But that's him. And like I said, I'm not going to judge someone based off that. But hey, look, man, you can be the judge. You can be holier than thou, and maybe you are. Maybe you're on the straight and narrow, and there ain't nothing that anyone can ever judge you about. That's cool. I respect that. I'm not. Right? I'm not perfect, and I don't think anybody else is, but that's just me. But thank you, though, for the calls. Fantastic. And that's going to wrap up the show. That's going to put a bow on this week. Fantastic. Mic drop moment. Thank you so much for that call. Appreciate you. So there you go. There it is. We'll be back on Monday, right? Got plenty to talk about over the weekend. There's a big Raider event going on Monday at the facility. I'll tell you about it on Monday's show. I'm very excited about it. We'll do that then. So have a fantastic weekend. Do what you do. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.